Pat here. I hope you are well. Today's Debt Report is looking at the brand new proposed legislation with a big promise and maybe some big questions. The Universal Outdoor Mobile Obligation, or UOMO for short. But before we dive in, do me a solid and hit that like button and subscribe so I can phone a friend later if I get lost in the outback. So what is this UOMO thing? In short, the government, which wants Telstra, Optus and TPG to provide basic mobile coverage, SMS and voice. Almost everywhere you can see the sky. That's roughly an extra 5 million square kilometers of coverage across the continent. Then in practice, the carriers will use a mix of their existing cell towers plus emerging low Earth orbit satellite tech that can send signals directly to your handset. The idea is to make it possible to call or text for help even if you're lost or injured in the bush. Proposed to be fully rolled out later on in 2027. So when we look into the headlines, we get some interesting tidbits. First of all, only 3 national carriers, Telstra, Optus, TPG, have to meet the new baseline coverage requirements. For now, smaller providers are off the hook. Then only SMS and voice calls count for coverage, not data or internet. In other words, your phone won't magically do Netflix in the desert, but you should at least be able to call someone or text for help. In fact, the legislation is technology neutral. Providers can use LEO satellites for the new coverage. For now, that's Starlink, soon maybe Amazon Leo. So in theory, all populated and even many remote areas of Australia, basically anything beyond current cell ranges, must have reasonable signal when you have your phone out. And practically, there are exceptions, of course. For example, national parks or offshore islands and radio quiet zones cannot use some of these satellite signals anyway. But the devil's in the details. So let's break down why people are both excited and, well, skeptical about UOMO. Here is why it might be a bad idea. New tech. Unproven promises. Experts have warned the reliance on emerging LEO satellites direct-to-device services is still experimental. Remember the Optus outage disaster in 2024 that knocked out 000 and cost lives? That was an old school network. The worry is if established networks can fail, what happens when we lean on brand new satellite networks that aren't fully mature? In fact, analysts note that achieving reliable nationwide satellite coverage could take several more years, well beyond the government's proposed timelines. If an outage hits during a storm or bushfire, public trust could evaporate and fingers would point at the politicians, not just engineers, but probably at the service providers. Now, single provider risk, of course, is another big one. Right now, SpaceX Starlink is basically the only game in town for high-speed LEO satellites. Relying heavily on one foreign-owned company for critical communication is a strategic weakness, of course. The government could force Telstra, Optus and TPG to use Starlink to meet UOMO, but as Paul Buddy points out, relying heavily on one private foreign-owned company introduces many new layers of vulnerabilities. So corporate mischief or outages at SpaceX could directly affect Australian mobile coverage, which is actually a scary thought. So in short, putting all your eggs in Elon's basket might not be wise. Now that there's the cost and trade-offs, meeting UOMO won't be free. Telcos have to expand networks or buy satellite capacity, and if you think your monthly bill won't budge, think again. Companies will likely pass costs to consumers somehow, they always do, either higher prices or cheaper services elsewhere. Plus, remember, this law only covers voice and SMS. The bill doesn't guarantee internet data, video calls, or any 5G speed. So imagine paying more while still needing an emergency GPS beacon or satellite hotspot to watch YouTube Outback. It's also a bit old school, focusing on text and calls as a throwback, since today's travelers and farmers often need broadband for things like farm monitoring or video calls. It doesn't really solve the big problem for many people, which is coverage. Essentially, we're legislating for a bare bones can call for help service, which some argue barely scratches the surface of modern connectivity needs. Then there's the regulatory complexity. UOMO is being added on top of an already outdated universal service obligation for phone services. Critics say it could create confusion and we'd have one set of rules for landline phones, another for cell towers, and now this extra layer involving satellites. If not handled carefully, it might end up layering red tape on rural communications without actually improving real-world services. As one commentator warned that I read earlier today, we must avoid assuming that private operators will maintain sufficient backup capacity. In short, the cons boil down to the tech is new and not bulletproof. We might be overpromising on coverage at huge costs, and consumers could pay more for just an emergency line. It's understandable some folks are nervous about funding and relying on experimental satellite system. But there are some positives. So first of all, safety first. The big selling point here is, well, it's safety and peace of mind. As Communication Minister Anika Wells said, no Australian should be left behind, meaning if you can see the sky, you should have a signal. Even in worst case scenarios like being lost in the bush or caught in a natural disaster, you'd at least be able to dial 000 or text for help. And consumer advocates at the ACCAN agree, reliable mobile connectivity has fast become essential for work, health, safety, and social participation. And so the bottom line is it could save lives, even if there's some sort of backup capacity that's non-existent. But there's also leveling the playing field, as the saying goes. You see, rural Australians have long complained about the digital divide. Better coverage means farmers and outback families aren't completely cut off. The National Farmers Federation is championing UOMO, saying mobile connectivity isn't a luxury for farmers, it's fundamental for safety, their business, and connecting families. It sounds like a washing machine powder. UOMO. If this works, you could be herding cattle in the middle of nowhere, still call your mum, or maybe message someone to manage some sort of farm equipment, or if you get hurt, you could call for help. It might also boost AG tech adoption. Imagine IoT sensors and drones that actually have a signal to send SMS messages that get translated via an AI to do other things. It could actually solve quite a few limitations at the moment. The NFF president Hamish McIntyre calls it a world's first policy that could make Australia a gold standard in rural communications. But there's also economic and social benefits. More coverage can strengthen business and communities. I mean, improved connectivity not only keeps people connected, but it means safer roads, strong businesses, and better access to services. If you can communicate with somebody, you can get stuff done. And this specifically was said by Regional Minister Christy McBain. Tourists can explore safely without losing their minds, of course. Small businesses can serve customers via credit card machines. Interesting, isn't it? Telehealth can reach a cabin in the sticks, and it really is about quality of life. Like, making this a universal right, regardless of carrier or plan, could push telcos to innovate on coverage and maybe even improve competition. Wouldn't that be nice? Then there's the technological leap. If UOMO is one of the first laws anywhere to truly embrace direct-to-device satellite comms, and well, in other words, the government is betting on next-gen tech, LEO satellites specifically, instead of writing off remote areas as too hard. If it succeeds, Australia might actually be ahead of the curve globally. And the flexibility of the law means it can add services to UOMO when the technical capabilities are available. So we could start with SMS voice and later include data or broadband as satellite tech matures. In short, it forces action. Telcos can't just sit around anymore. They have to partner with innovators like SpaceX, Starlink to make it happen. Now then, what do you guys think? Is the universal outdoor mobile obligation brilliant or absolute bonkers? On one hand, it's bold to move to ensure nobody's beyond reach in an emergency. On the other hand, it throws some big ass at carriers and hinges on tech that's still cooking in the oven and actually almost a monopoly. As always, like and subscribe. We'll be keeping our eyes on UOMO as it wins its way through Parliament. I'll catch you all in next time under clear skies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye!